I decided to do this video as part of my healing journey. So I've been on this journey for a couple years almost, where I've been healing from this betrayal. I was betrayed, of course, by my husband, but also by my cousin. This video is in no way at all to excuse my husband's part in it or to say, oh, what my cousin did was worse, or none of that. Like, I'm at a point where I know that the responsibility mostly lies on my husband, but the part with my cousin is very difficult because we were close, or at least I thought we were close. I never in my wildest dreams imagined this happening to me. And yeah, so I think just for my own personal healing, I'm making this video because I also blog about my situation, my healing, my journey, and I'm able to kind of blog about even how I found everything out about my husband. I'm in certain groups that it kind of helps. I've done counseling. I've done a lot of things. So I feel like with him, I'm in a good healing process. With her, there's just no process. Like, there's nothing other than I think she's just a horrible, disgusting person. And all I can even ever do is say my version of events that happened. I'm sure she has her version, which is, to be honest, I don't even know. I have an idea of what some of it would be, but I'm sure some of it would just blow my mind because this girl is certifiably insane. I mean, seriously. So I guess I'll just start as if I'm just telling this to like a friend, to somebody, maybe somebody new. 2 years ago almost, I was living life like normal. Now I did notice my husband and I were not as close as we had been. Like, I felt us drifting apart, but because I trusted him so much, and to me he was like this perfect person who, yeah, he had some of his flaws, he's human, but like would never ever cheat on me. I never suspected that. So sometimes people say like, oh, I thought they were, and then when I caught them I was like, yeah, I knew it. That's not really the case for me. Like, for me, I just totally thought, not my husband, he would never. So this was very surprising to me. So in February 11th of 2019, I'm at work and it's almost my sister's birthday, and I had bought her something online. So I'm about to get off and I'm like, oh, when is that package coming in? I start going through my emails, and as I'm going through, I accidentally actually open a Verizon bill, and it's like your top contacts for the week. And it was on my husband's number because I kind of got an email for everyone's number. And on the top, it's like 233 texts to this one number. So right away, I looked that number up in my phone. It's not in my phone. So I'm like, who is he talking to? So, okay, there's a couple things here. So also, because our marriage was declining, in 2019, like fall of 18, I was like, maybe we should just get a separation or a divorce. Like, I'm just lonely and I don't want to cheat on you. So much stuff in our relationship. So in the past, a long time ago, I did cheat on my husband, and that's something I've blogged about, talked about. So I'm not sitting here saying like I'm some perfect person and oh my god, this happened to me. Like, I've done my stuff too. But so many things, like I could probably do so many videos because from different perspectives or different situations in my life. Anyway, okay, so I didn't want to ever cheat again. Like, after that time I cheated before, I came home one day, came clean, told my husband everything. We saw a counselor, kind of. Anyway, that's its own thing because I feel like we never really truly healed from that, but that's not something I knew until kind of going through all of this. Okay, so I just knew I did not want to cheat again. That's just not who I wanted to be. I saw the hurt it did to my family. And so in the fall of 18, when me and Jay are not doing so well, I tell him I think we should get a divorce or separation because I'm feeling really lonely and I may cheat. Not I may cheat, and I don't want to cheat. And so he says, oh, well, what can I do? Let's just really try. And the holidays are all coming up. Let's get through them. So I'm like, no, you're right. And I do love you. You're like my best friend. We have the most fun together. So yes, of course. Little did I know, right, that all this stuff is going on. So Okay, so then in January, by like late January, things are probably even worse, like worse than they were in the fall. Like I would even say like mid-December all the way through January, it was just horrible. So towards the end of January, I bring up again, like, we should get separated or get a divorce. And he's like, well, what else could we do? I just don't want to. And I'm like, I just don't think we're working. So then we talk about maybe just having like an open marriage. So that way it's not cheating, but also we're best friends. We could still share our life together. It's funny because we did do this and I was all about it kind of. But the truth is, now that I know me, I think I even knew this before, but it's maybe I didn't want to admit it. I'm not a open marriage type of person. I'm stingy. I don't like to share, and I like to really have a connection with someone. So for me, I'm not a very casual, I just wouldn't do the casual connections. Like, I mean, I did, or like I even casually talk to people and stuff, but it's not fulfilling to me. So, okay, lesson learned there. That was just a bad experience. Okay. So kind of all these things kind of play a part. So I'm hoping that this all kind of makes sense. So I find this number. I'm like, what the heck? So we are in an open marriage when I find this number. However, he and I had just talked on Super Bowl Sunday, which that year fell on February 3rd, which is tomorrow. So it'll be 2 years tomorrow that this happened. So he and I go to a bar and we're sitting there having some drinks before the game, and our sons are going to come over and hang out. And I said, are you talking to anyone? How are you feeling about this? Like, let's do a check-in about the open marriage. I'm talking to a couple people I've just met, and where are you at? And he's like, oh, I'm really doing this for you because you need this. And I'm like, okay. And partly, I'll be honest, in my mind, I'm like, you better not be, because to me, the only reason we're even doing this is because for whatever reason, there's a disconnect here. Now that I know so much about infidelity and cheating, all the signs were there, but I just, that was not where my mind was at the time, or maybe I just didn't know the things I know now. So anyway, he tells me that he doesn't feel the need to talk to anyone, blah, 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 whatever. Okay. So looking at this phone record, he talked to this person like all day on Super Bowl Sunday, like during the game. So I'm just like, I thought you weren't talking to somebody. You told me that day at the bar. Okay. So I see it. I get the number. I'm still at work. I leave work. I go park under a tree nearby, and I'm freaking out. And I'm just kind of like looking it over and kind of adding up those dates. Like, oh, Super Bowl Sunday. That night we went to a movie, and you text this person after the movie, and just kind of like trying to get it all together. And from the looks of it, the texting started the week, like, or 2 weeks before, but it actually started a day or two before we agreed on an open marriage. So now I'm even like, you started talking to somebody before we even agreed to this. So there's like a lot of little parts in there. So okay, I am sitting there. I call my sister. She doesn't answer. And I do now wish she would have, because I feel like I would have handled things so much differently. Anyway, coulda, shoulda, woulda, right? So I text the number and I'm like, hey, and I get back, stop. And I'm like, that's weird. So then I say, who's this? And almost like instant text replies, and it's like, stop, do not text this number, some stop. And then there was like a little sentence after, excuse me, and I don't know what that was. Okay, so whatever. So I call the number and there's no voicemail, nobody picks up. So I'm like, this is so weird. And I think I call it a couple times driving home. But either way, I stop at the grocery store, I pick up stuff for dinner, I get here, I walk in, I'm like, as soon as our son goes to work, I would like to talk to you. And he's like, okay. And so about 45 minutes pass and he's like, hey, so what's up? And I'm like, so yeah, I know you're talking to somebody. I pretty much saw the phone bill and you are texting somebody like all the time. And this started even before we agreed on the open marriage. So you know what? I'm done. I don't know what's going on with us. You're a liar. I don't even know who the hell you are. And I'm just done. And so that was kind of that conversation. That night he stayed in the spare room. We really didn't even talk the rest of the night. I stayed in my room. He stayed in there. That was it. I went to work the next day. at that time, my cousin and I were hanging out all the time. So, like, even all the time in the fall of before, and then we were having dinner and drinks at least once a week and probably texting and talking daily. Like, how's your day? What are you doing? How's life? What's the plan next week? Like, me and her were always talking. So I'm thinking probably, but I can't quite remember that. I'm sure I probably reached out to her and I'm like, oh my gosh, I found out that Jay's talking to somebody. I don't know if I text her or it was just when we met that week, but I definitely know her and I talked about it at some point. Okay, so the next day, me and him talk, and he's like, oh, it's a waitress. I had just met her. She put her phone number on the back of my receipt. So my husband worked an ambulance service for this town close by. And he says that when he went for breakfast one morning, she gave him his number. So I'm like, all right. And so I'm like, what's her name? What's the name of the restaurant? So he makes up this name. Like, so he right away says, you're gonna hate me. And I'm like, is it someone I know? And he's like, well, you would just hate me no matter who it is. So I'm like, I didn't really think anything of that. But then he says, her name is Jen. And I'm like, okay, Jen what? And he's like, I can't really remember. It's like something like Yara, like Rivera or Mira. And I'm like, okay. And he's like, yeah, Jen Mira. And I'm like, okay. So I'm like looking all over every social media platform, like Jen Mira, Jen Mira. She doesn't exist. So I'm like, what the heck? And it's so weird because, again, I think I just believe him so much that I'm just like, okay, well, let me look into it. And so by now he's telling me, I love you. I want to work it out. I'm stupid. What was I thinking? And so I'm almost like, well, we're not doing this open marriage thing. We dodged a bullet. We're going to fix our marriage. Oh my gosh, maybe this was a wake-up call we needed to just like get back on track. So I'm like all hopeful and excited. In fact, I remember like I went to lunch with like my oldest son. I went to lunch with my sister that week. And the whole time I'm like, oh my God, you guys, this in a sad way is like one of the best things that's ever happened because it kind of opened my eyes. Like, I do want to work on my marriage. Like, whatever's going on with us, we need to fix it. And so that's kind of what his lie did for me, was give me hope, I guess. Okay, so during this time, there's a part-time where Debbie is my cousin. So this is the cousin that my husband was cheating on me with. There's a time that Debbie and I go to dinner and have drinks, and we're at Buffalo Wild Wings, and I'm sitting in a booth and there's a chair across, but she's like, I want to sit in a booth too. So she's sitting right next to me. So we're like side by side, having our drinks, ordering our food, laughing. Oh, I love you. I missed you. How was your day? And by the way, this angers me so much towards my husband. Like he knew all of this, was lying to me, and let me hang out, confide in her, trust in her. Yeah, I may need a break. So there's a lot of things I've worked on with my husband. So again, this video is not kind of about that. It's more my stuff with her, because her and I just, okay. So we're sitting there, and like early on in the conversation, she says, hey, Carm, so who was Jay talking to after all? And I'm like, oh my gosh, Deb, it was like some waitress he met. I give her the name of the restaurant. I tell her, oh, and he even said that she recently moved away and she was going to start working at this other restaurant. And so she's like, oh, I know a cop that works in that town. Let me call him, see if he could keep an eye out for her every time he goes for breakfast or coffee. And we'll find out where she works, who she is. And I'm like, yeah. And she's like, I can even take a day off of work. You take a day off of work and we'll go drive up there and we'll just go to every restaurant. And I'm like, oh my God, I love you so much. You're like the girl who has like my back. You're like my partner in crime. And we would kind of always joke like that, like on social media, like, you're my partner in crime. And so then she literally sits next to me, and I don't ever look over her shoulder or anything, opens her phone, does whatever, and she closes it, and she's like, okay, sweetie, I did it. I told him he's going to keep an eye out for her, so you don't worry about it. As soon as he tells me anything, I will tell you. So I'm like, you're the best. Thank you. And she's like, you know what I think? You know what I think was going on? I think that Jay went to the store and bought one of those disposable phones. And I think that he used that to text himself to see if you would ever see it on the bill and if you cared. And I'm like, no, you don't know him like that. Like, he would never waste his time. Like, that's such a waste of time. And to me, he's just not a person that would waste his time in a stupid way. Or like for dumb stuff. Like, we're too old to be playing games. So I'm like, or so I thought. So I'm like, no, no way. And then so she gets up to go to the bathroom. She's all, well, tell him that's what I said, I think. And tell me what he said. How did she say it? She said, tell him that's what I said and see what he thinks. And she goes to the bathroom. And I legit remember being like, okay. But now, or like in hindsight, like when everything comes out later, oh my God, like who does that? Like almost it made me realize she's basically in that moment telling me what to come home and tell Jay to lie to me. Mind blown. Like, this is who this girl is. Like, no conscience, no nothing. Horrible. So, for 19 days, I believe this crap. I do question him a lot. Some of his stuff doesn't make sense. He doesn't remember anything. So, of course, if anyone's ever been cheated on, I'm sure there's the whole, I don't remember. I call total BS on that. And even like professionals will say there is some stuff you don't remember. I get that. Like some stuff maybe you don't remember. But I think like to not remember a lot of it, bullshit. I call it because I remember a lot about when I did mine. So I'm like, you're an effing liar. So anyway, he claims that he doesn't remember a lot about this Jen Mira. Well, how would you remember that, sweetie? Because she's made up. Okay, but I don't know that at this time. So one day I go take my mom out of town, like an hour away, to go do some errands and stuff. And my mom's a little bit difficult in her own way. So by the time I'm done with her, so it's even funny. So as we're out of town, my mom goes into a store. Sorry, my dog's all needy. We go into a store and, or my mom does. And when she's in there, I call Debbie and I'm like, oh my gosh, what are you doing? Where are we going to drink this week? What are we going to do? And I'm just like, and so even when my mom gets back in the car, she's like, who are you talking to? And I was like, to Debbie. And she's like, I don't know why you talk to her. She's like such a bad mom. She never has her kids. And I'm like, oh my God, Mom, stop talking crap about her. I like her. And so I'm literally defending her. Okay. So this is like the day before I actually find out everything, pretty much everything. So I'm like, oh my, like sometimes when I think about the way things happen to me, I'm like, holy crap. Because some, like, seriously, dirty. They did me so dirty, him and her. They just did me so dirty to like have me there like a damn idiot. Okay, so many things. So that night when I come back from taking my mom, I go to my sister's and I'm like, oh, Mom's exhausting and I'm just tired and I'm kind of sad about this whole thing with Jay. Like, I don't know, like it scares me. Like he got so close to cheating and like, what if I wouldn't have found out? Like, where would we be right now? And just like, we're having a moment. And then I go home and I sleep, or I come home and I sleep that night and I'm crying. Like, I just remember like falling asleep crying. Like, it was just like a lot, like a heavy day. And when I wake up the next day, like in my mind, I don't know why I didn't think of this, right? For like the whole 19 days, like from February 11th that I found out. So now it's March 1st. I wake up March 1st and I'm like, I never checked bills before that bill. Like, I only checked what was in that email. Like, I didn't go months behind in my bill. So I work early, so I get ready, I haul butt to work, and the first thing I do, I turn on my computer, log into Verizon, and I pull up all the phone bills. And at that time, Jay was working the ambulance, so he stayed the night, so he's over there. And so I'm like, sorry. So I'm like, I'm there at work. I pull these up. Sorry, I got sidetracked. And all of a sudden, it's just tons of text messages with this number all the way back to early December. So this whole time I thought he started talking to her like late January, and I could see all the way up till maybe it's even, I could see like 3 months worth, but all of them have that number. So whatever I saw, I lose it. Like, I'm there at work and I'm like, oh my God, he keeps telling me he doesn't remember. He doesn't remember stuff about her. He freaking knows exactly who this girl is. He knows so much about her. They've been talking for months. This explains so much. So I call him. I'm in my office by myself and I call him and I'm like, you liar. I just checked the phone bill, and then I lie and I say, and you've been talking to her since July. I can see the bills all the way back to July, and he doesn't deny it. He's like, I know, I'm sorry. And I'm like, we're done. Get all your stuff. Just get out of the house. You're a freaking liar. I can't trust you. But then at the same time, so like I have my moment with him. I'm pissed, but then I'm a mess. Like, I'm like, what the heck? And at this point, it's just, I'm really freaked out. So I text my boss. I'm like, sorry, I have an emergency at the house. I gotta go. Oh yeah, go take care of whatever. So right as I drive up, he had just gotten home, and my father-in-law and brother-in-law come in the house, and that's rare. They hardly ever come visit. They're like, we all kind of live nearby, but they hardly ever come over. So I'm sure just like for morning coffee or whatever. But I come in the house and just serious as hell, and I'm like, I'm sorry guys, but can you please leave? I need to talk to Jason. And so they were like, okay. And I took off my wedding ring, put it on the kitchen table, and I was like, what the hell? And he's like, I'm sorry. And I'm like, you know everything about her. You know her name. You know where she works. You know everything. So don't even lie to me. You've been talking to her since July. You're going to tell me everything right now. So for, I think, a little while, he still kind of does the, I don't remember. I don't know. And even though maybe I pull a little bit more information, all made up crap, I end up finding out, like, you know, just like, oh, well, she has a couple little kids and blah, blah, blah. Then at some point, and I don't know what the turning point in this conversation is, he says, you're right, it's not a waitress. I feel stupid. It's like a catfish situation. So I'm like, what do you mean a catfish situation? And he's like, one day just somebody starts texting me and they're like, hey, I think you're cute. I know you know me, but I don't want to tell you who I am. And so I'm like, okay. And what else would she tell you? Like, you have to know who she is. And like, you guys never exchanged like Snapchat or Facebook. He's like, no, I don't know who it is. I don't, like, sometimes she would kind of mess with me. Like, I have blonde hair, or do I? And like, he kind of just would say stuff like that. And so I'm just like, no, you guys have been talking since July. At this point, you either know who she is, or she's said enough things that you got to know more or less who it is. And I'm just like really grilling him, and like, it's just like ugly, like an ugly fight. And then he did say something where he said sometimes she would send him messages saying, it looks like you had fun this weekend, or your boys look like they had fun. So I'm like, oh, it's somebody who has you like on Facebook or Instagram or something. So let's start looking through all your friends. Like, it has to be one of them. And so it's so funny now, like telling this, because I'm like, God, I'm an idiot. Anyway, so at some point I get him to even like, I'm just like, keep on saying like, bull, like, come on, you know, and I know if you talk to somebody this long, you're like friends with her on like everything. So he's like, yeah, okay, we were friends on Snapchat. And so I'm like, okay, great. What's her Snapchat name? And this, I'm so grateful for this, because this is kind of what opened this whole thing wide open. So he tells me her name is Peaches _ 4 numbers. I don't remember them all. One's a 4 and a little peach. And so I'm like, okay. And you've got to remember, like, you've been talking to her since July. So I know you know the Snapchat name. Like, you stop lying. And he's like, no, that's it. It's something like that. I mean, 4. And it's so funny. So like, on a side note, real quick, when you get cheated on like this, it's so crazy how things change for you. So like, now it's almost 2 years. I can deal with peaches, but oh my God, I hated the word. I hated talking about them. My poor father-in-law grows them in his yard and will bring some up. And he's like, I brought you guys peaches. And I'm just like, ugh. And so it's so funny how the things that really stick to you, like after something like this happens, because of the lies and the betrayal and the, okay, off of that side note. Okay. So I Google, can you see your old Snapchat friends? And something in there says like, you can run a Snapchat data report. And so I get his phone and I'm like, give me your password and I'm going to run this report. And so it lets me in, it lets me request the report. And it's like, your report will be emailed to you in 10 minutes or so. And so I'm like, for those 10 minutes, I'm like asking him questions. I'm like, okay, and what else? And what else does she tell you? And you can't even think of who it is. And are you sure? And so I'm just like, oh, I'm going to see this name any minute. And so sure enough, I get the ding on the phone and it's like, your report is ready. And so I think I'm on his cell phone, but again, like that day was so hard for me. After that, I don't remember everything exactly the way it happened. So I don't know, was I on my laptop or on his phone, but I opened the report and it's so crazy to me because I was truly just so confused. And so as I'm reading the report, it's literally like Dulce this and Dulce that and Dulce. And I know my cousin Debbie's Snapchat is Dulce underscore whatever the fuck her ugly snatch. Just kidding. So I know that's hers. And so I'm like, is it Debbie? And at that moment, I'm actually literally like, that's not what I think. I'm just confused. So I'm like, is it Debbie? And he's sitting across the table and he stands up and he's like, I know I'm a piece of shit. In that moment, I don't know. I think I must have just gone into like fight or flight because it was just so overwhelming. Like just for him to say that, just to really like, what? Like, and where did that come from? And so I at some point I have his phone. So maybe that is what I looked at the report on and I go, oh, well, let's see what you and Debbie talk about. And he grabs it from me and he's like, no, don't. It's really bad. Ugh. And I just lose it. So I start going towards him. I grab his phone. I break his phone. Yeah, I pretty much just out of anger, just really lose my shit. So I remember like there was like a photo on the wall that said our family name and I'm like banging it on the floor. Yeah, it's I guess what happens when you're just caught off guard by something so traumatic. So he leaves, sadly. And kind of it's crazy because going through this with him and learning to heal and growing and changing, I've learned so much about him and how different we fight or how different we react to hard moments, and we're complete opposites. So like when I go in for that, he's like scared and he's like, I'm out. And so that day I was like, how dare you leave? But now that I know him more, like I think that's just his natural fight or flight response, is like just to protect himself or just to kind of get out of that ugly situation. And I was really upset. The good thing is, as I would call him, like when he first left, I was like, get your ass back over here. We have so much to talk about. And he's like, no, I'm scared. And he did say though, like, I'll talk to you, like what, like we could talk on the phone. And anytime I did call him, he would answer. So okay, that's fair. Well, not fair, but that's how it happened. And I'm grateful that he did at least answer my calls. So I'm just like in such a rage. I'm here home alone. He had left and I get my phone and I freaking call Debbie and she's working. And I am like, she's like, hello. And I'm like, you're the bitch who's been talking to my husband? And she's like, Carm, hold on.